Hey guys, I thought I'd sit down and take a second to talk about the whole Dilson Herrera fiasco that's been going on in the Reds organization over the past year and a half since, or well, I guess it's just been a year since he was acquired in the Jay Bruce trade. Um, you know, when he came over, he played for about a week or so before he was shut down. With shoulder fatigue, I guess. Um, and then he came back about a week later. Didn't play too much, pretty much just using a pinch hitting kind of role before he returned to the lineup for the rest of the year. No big deal. Um, you know, Went to spring training with the big league club this year. They started trying him out at third base a little bit just to kind of maybe prepare him for a utility kind of role if that need did arise. And sure enough, he had a setback, I guess, with his shoulder. Making the long throws. They shut him down for a little bit. When he came back, he was basically just a designated hitter for a while. They sent him to minor league camp, and then he started the season in Louisville. While he was there, for the first 3 weeks of the season, he did not play back-to-back days in the field. They didn't want to push it. He'd play in the field, and then he'd be the designated hitter, or he'd get an off day if they didn't have a designated hitter that day. Got out to a really slow start at the plate with the bats. After about 6 weeks, he really started to turn it on, but he still wasn't playing every day. He played, I guess, 41 games in the last 2.5 months of the season. Definitely not an everyday kind of guy, but he started hitting well. Hitting like the guy that he had been in the past. His walk rate was a little bit lower, but he was hitting over 300 in those 41 games. He was slugging, I believe, 484. So when he was putting the bat on the ball, he was doing what he had always done. It's just the walk rate was a little bit lower. But it was last week he was shut down, and he had yet to see the Reds doctors, although I guess the preliminary reports weren't very good, and they expected him to miss the rest of the season. But they were going to go send him out to see the Reds doctors and kind of see what they had said. News came out yesterday that he's going to require shoulder surgery to have bone spurs removed. Now that's a very different injury than what they diagnosed him with in spring training, which was that basically some of the muscles in his shoulder weren't as strong as they should be, and it was causing problems in other areas, and they put him on a rehab plan to strengthen those muscles. Now, whether that worked or not, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I didn't see his medical reports, but it did seem that after a while, he started hitting a little bit better. So I'm assuming that at the very least it was working a little bit. It definitely improved the situation. But Dilson Herrera first started having shoulder problems in 2015 when he was with the Mets. He experienced shoulder problems in 2016 with the Mets. So we've got two different medical teams that have kind of looked over his shoulder over a span of 3 seasons. Until a week ago, they had not seen any structural damage within his shoulder. I'm assuming now that when he was with the Mets, he had MRIs on his shoulder, given that he was with them for 2 seasons and did have shoulder issues. That would seem like some sort of malpractice issue if they didn't actually get an MRI on his shoulder and give it a look. So I'm assuming that they also looked inside of his shoulder and did not see any sort of structural damage like the Reds didn't see. Now, is it possible that these bone spurs are a result of, whatever was going on with his shoulder and things compensating for it? Sure, that is definitely a possibility. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I can't say for certain whether it is or isn't. But I do feel very confident that the bone spurs that they did find and they are going to operate on to have, to scrape them down and have removed, were not there in the past. I feel that, the Reds wouldn't have come out and said, oh, he just needs to, strengthen some muscles if, he had clear bone spurs showing up in the scans they were looking at. Now, where this all becomes a bigger issue for the Reds is that, Dilson Herrera is not going to play again this season. Dilson Herrera has to stick on the 25-man roster next season because he will be out of options. Now, it is possible that the Reds could ask for and receive a 4th option year for Dilson Herrera, but given how much he did play this season, that seems incredibly unlikely that Major League Baseball would grant that for him. So the Reds are kind of in this weird situation where they've got a player who pretty much played with an injury of some sort all year. And as I said, he did hit well over his last 41 games, but how is he going to perform coming back from the surgery? I would assume that he'll probably be back to normal as long as this is a correction of whatever the problem has been in the past. But it does put them in a weird situation where, he's going to have to stick on the roster, and they don't really know what they've got. They're going to have to go with what they see in spring training, and as we all know, spring training lies a lot of the time. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can clearly see a skill difference in players taking that big step. Wandy Peralta this year was a glaring example of that. He was just a completely different guy than he has been in the past, and to the Reds' credit, they saw that. They basically said, he's different. The numbers, in the past they kind of don't tell the same guy that he is now. They saw that slider developing in a way that it had not done in the past. So sometimes you will see things like that, but it puts them in a weird situation. And given how Scooter Gennett has played this year, maybe Dilson Herrera doesn't even have a starting job. And as a guy who pretty much is limited defensively to second base, that kind of puts the Reds in a situation where it might be tough to really use Dilson Herrera as a utility player. He has very limited experience anywhere else on the field, and where he does have experience on the field other than second base, nobody really thinks he can play there defensively. So it's a bad situation for the Reds to be in, but hopefully whatever surgery, or I guess this surgery, will fix whatever has been causing him problems in the past, and hopefully that bat will play. It seems like everything says that it will, scouting wise. His numbers in the past in AAA have, they've been strong. So, hopefully the surgery will fix everything, and that'll, kind of make it a little bit easier on the Reds to figure out what they want to do. Now, unfortunately, the other part of that Dilson Herrera-Jay Bruce trade was left-handed pitcher Max Whittle. And, as sad and as strange as it sounds, he actually also came over in that trade with a shoulder injury that apparently he wasn't telling anyone about immediately. After a few starts, he was shut down last year with what they refer to as shoulder fatigue. But earlier this year, Max Whittle came out and said that basically, he was pitching while injured but wasn't telling anyone. And so the Reds didn't really have a reason to believe that he was injured. But, it did it did cause kind of an issue, and they shut him down. And, to his credit, he came back and pitched this year. He pitched in Dayton in May, and then he came to Billings and pitched a few starts. But he also had to be shut down, and he had labrum surgery last week, or earlier this week. I'm sorry. So that we're gonna look back on this trade, and hopefully it'll turn out well for the Reds. But right now, it looks really, really weird. I do believe that the Reds medical staff did their due diligence in this trade, and I don't believe for a second that they didn't know that Dilson Herrera had been dealing with shoulder problems. My dog is losing his mind. I don't believe for a second that the Reds didn't do their due diligence on the medical reports for either guy. But, I think they probably took a little bit of a risk with Dilson Herrera, hoping that, he was going to get over whatever it was, since it wasn't structurally showing up in the MRIs. And then, with Max Whittle, there was no reason to believe that he was injured. He was pitching at the time, and, he hadn't been complaining about any injuries to anyone. So, sometimes these things happen, but it's just a weird all-around situation. Hopefully it works out. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. But, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about the weirdness of the situation and kind of, put into perspective kind of how things have played out. One last thing I wanted to talk about real quick was Jose Siri and what he's been doing in Dayton. Last night he took the first pitch of the game that he saw, and I guess it was the first pitch of the game. He's the leadoff hitter, and they were on the road, and hit a long home run to extend his hitting streak to 31 games. He ended the first inning by throwing a runner out at the plate. He would later walk, homer again, and double. This guy has the best tools in the entire farm system across the board. I mean, he's a plus runner. He's a plus defender in center field. He's got power. He can hit the ball. The one area that you kind of wonder about is his pitch recognition, plan kind of thing. And that does show up in the numbers. Right now, I think that his strikeout to walk ratio is about 4.5 to 1, and you really would like it to be somewhere around 3. So there's definitely plenty of room to continue improving there. But do not get me wrong, he has taken enormous steps forward this year versus the past in that area. There's still some work to do for him there, but it's been really impressive to see where he's at right now versus where he was at the same time last year. He just turned 22, so he's definitely not young for Dayton, but he's not overly old either. And as a center fielder, there's some wiggle room there for his bat if he does continue to struggle in that area a little bit. But I think that he's probably going to remain in Dayton this year for the rest of the season. Daytona is not going to the playoffs unless they pretty much win every single game the rest of the way, whereas Dayton is. They're already in the playoffs. They made the playoffs with what they did in the first half. And so, letting a guy like Jose Siri, who he's had some ups and downs in the past, just letting him thrive in Dayton right now while continuing to work on, the pitch recognition and plate discipline kind of things, and then, playing in the playoffs. That's kind of more of an important thing than getting him another 5 weeks of at bats in Advanced A in Daytona and returning him there next year. So I would personally be surprised if he got promoted this year. I think that the Reds will keep him in Dayton this year, and then next year, if he continues doing what he's been doing this year, you get a little bit more aggressive with the promotions. If he's at the end of May, mid-June, he's just destroying the ball, you send him to Double A at that point. I don't think that there's too much to be gained by getting him 125 plate appearances in Daytona versus Dayton this year to end things. But you do give him that kind of playoff experience if you keep him in Dayton. You let him thrive in an area where he can continue to work on things in a much more comfortable environment for him, because he knows that he can perform well at this level already. I think that's probably just something that's a little bit more important right now for his development. But I think we're going to wrap things up there for now. I've kind of rambled on a little bit more than I planned to when I sat down to record this. But if you're not subscribed here on YouTube, hit the little red subscribe button there. You'll get updates on your phone whenever we upload videos. Again, I feel like I've been saying this all season. I'm going to try and get more of these little video podcasts out, but for some reason I don't always get around to it. But there are definitely plenty more prospect videos coming out soon. I've got a few that I'm just waiting to upload now. I always wait to upload those with the articles that accompany things on the site. But I'd expect to have 2 or 3 more of those uploaded in the next week. But yeah, so thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you guys next time. See ya.